your owners had borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars to put in their pockets. They had to explain to the people holding that debt why this company was struggling.
Lawsuits are public, so let's create a narrative.
Part of their settlement, like what they want, was for you to turn on me. And the language was, we want him to stick a knife in Prince's ribs and twist.
I will forever think of it as the single biggest mistake in the history of the direct selling channel. I mean, who terminates their top sales leader without a phone call?
They're asking me to not only lie, but turn on somebody who's a dear friend of mine, who I trust implicitly, and this like hope that maybe the end is in sight almost like vanished in front of my eyes, and it was just like the gut punch of all gut punches, you know?
All right, welcome back to the Justin Prince Show. Man, what an honor to be in Truman Hunt's home for this episode. In fact, of all of the episodes I've done, this to me is probably the most special one. This is really the origin story of Make Wellness. You know, how did this all happen? Where did it come from? How did this company go from like an idea to shipping a product to doing $100 million in 11 months? You know, I just got as I'm driving up here from the Science of Scaling. They're doing a big group coach, you know, all their coaches from around the country, the book Science of Scaling, and they had me come up there and speak to say, how did you guys do this? How do you scale this company? So this is kind of that origin story. And some of you listening will be Make Wellness affiliates, and you're a huge part of this. There's probably most of you listening that are new to this story, but it's a comeback story for sure. It's a business that was forged in fire. And I hope that as you hear this story, it's one that you will be encouraging to you, whether you're in the challenges now or you go through them later in your life, that you say, man, it's possible for me to, you know, come back as well. And then it's a great business success story. So, man, what an honor to be here with you guys. Appreciate you being partners and friends. And, you know, Truman said when we first started the company, he said, no jerks allowed. I think it was his first rule that he laid down. He said, no jerks allowed. And it started into what has turned into an incredible company. So I want to start with this. We're actually up here in a place called Pepperwood. It's a neighborhood called Pepperwood in Sandy, Utah. And this, I think, will lead us into the whole thing, because this is actually where I first heard the name Truman Hunt, was in Pepperwood. So when I was 12 years old, my parents moved up here. We kind of moved from a middle class, kind of lower middle class neighborhood down the road to like what I thought as a 12-year-old was like the rich neighborhood. You know, I was like, whoa, I remember feeling very out of place. And I remember when I was probably 12 or 13, this would have been 1991, 1992. It was the first Gulf War, if you remember the first Gulf War. And on CNN, you'd watch the war. And they had what they called a Hummer or a Humvee, but you'd only see it on CNN. You'd only watch it on the news. And I remember there's this guy that drove, his daughter was about 2 or 3 years older than me. So I'm 13 and she was like 15, and she was so pretty. You know, she was so cute. We all had a crush on her. But her dad was really rich, and he did a thing called Nu Skin. I didn't even know what Nu Skin was at this point. I didn't know what that meant, other than he's the rich guy with the cute girl, you know. And he drove a Hummer, but it wasn't the Hummer like you see today, like an H2. It was the one from the Gulf War. Like, it was literally like just going down the thing. So Nu Skin was this company that had all this success. And I remember hearing, I didn't know what CEO meant. I didn't know all these things. But I remember hearing that there was a guy named Truman Hunt that was the CEO of Nu Skin. And you lived just down, just down the street from me.
We were neighbors. we weren't exactly hanging out together when you were 16 and I was 36.
No, I was going to say I was more like 13, you know, at that point. Yeah, I was just a little kid. But I remember having a ton of admiration from afar. As I got a little bit older into my career, we had a neighbor. The guy's name's Dow Jones. That's his name, like the stock market. And I got a call once. This is when I was introduced to direct sales. 25 years old. I'm driving down the freeway. I have my little boy Isaac in the back seat, and I get a call from this guy named Greg Anderson. He's a medical doctor, and he says, network marketing. I didn't even know what network marketing was. In fact, all I knew about it was I didn't want to know anything else. I was kind of skeptical about the whole idea. And he says to me, he goes, I know you've been successful, but God, I think you should look into this. I said, well, who introduced you to this? Because I was kind of skeptical. I'm like, who's conning Greg Anderson into conning me into one of those one things? And he said, Dow Jones. Dow Jones I had a lot of respect for, and Dow Jones was introduced a couple of years earlier to Nu Skin through you know, saying, hey, what are you going to go do next? So I feel like a lot of my original ties to direct sales kind of came from your decision to do it. And then the other thing I'd share is I modeled a guy named Nathan Ricks. They gave me a DVD, very first day I joined direct sales. I was like, so what do I do now? And they go, watch this DVD. And it's called Driving Lines. I don't know if you ever saw this presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this guy named Nathan Ricks who became from afar a real mentor of mine. And I chased him. I modeled my career after him. I just thought he was a professional, and he was driven, and he was focused, and he was super successful guy, both in his direct sales career, but then most importantly out of it, and maybe most importantly with his family and his faith. He was just a good person. And part of the reason that story is relevant is when he died in a tragic plane accident, like in his jet, he died as the pilot. And we when I say reconnected, we kind of connected really for the first time at his funeral.
Yeah. Right.
2+ years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that story of Nathan Ricks and the story of you kept me in the game for many, many years. And so when we kind of reconnected at that funeral, Nathan became kind of this mentor for me that I could have conversations with at a level that most people couldn't. And then, you and I remember the very first phone call, it was like therapeutic for me to talk to someone that I could like really speak really knew the business at a really intimate level and had kind of been there, done that. Catch up your story in direct sales, and I want to introduce how Jay and I got connected.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to hear you talk about that, because it just kind of rewinds the clock a couple decades for me. And and interestingly enough, Nathan Ricks is actually the brother-in-law of the Tillotson guy who's driving the Hummer, right?
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's just such a small world how all of these lives are intertwined. But, for me, even though we weren't running around the streets of Pepperwood together in your teenage years, everyone in the neighborhood knew that Justin Prince was a go-getter. And so it wasn't surprising to me to hear that you had made your way to direct selling. And a little bit surprising that Dow and Greg, my friends, had recruited you away into a different deal.
Yeah, of course.
And to tell you the truth, over the years, I wondered why, we hadn't connected on a little bit of a deeper level.
Yeah.
Because I knew that you were such an up and comer on the sales front. It just it would have been easy for us to connect. But at Nathan's funeral, we did, and I did not know that he had played such an important role for you in the development of your career. Not surprised, to hear that was the case. But he's a great loss, isn't he? Great loss to everyone who knew him. And so for me, it was actually an honor to have you say, "Look, I need a mentor. Can we talk?" And of course, I was happy to do that.
By the way, I want to hear this from you. Why did you take the time? Because you don't need to at this stage of your career. You could golf and you could do whatever other things you like to do. Because we had calls that were a couple hour long calls. We'd like, I jokingly said that I owed you a lot of counseling money, to say, to helping you, have you help me process, my business and what was happening. And the business was in a little bit of a declining situation. I'm just interested from your perspective, where that comes from for you to take that much time and pour into, in essence, the next generation. Like, where does that come from for you?
I think it's a couple things. I think, number one, I love the business. I've found in my life that it's just such a unique platform to influence people's lives. We're all involved in family. We're all involved in church. We're all involved in community activities. But a direct selling business and a direct selling platform is truly unique in its ability to influence people's lives. And I value that. And I was missing it, because I've been out of this space for a few years. And I knew, we all knew, the whole space knows that Justin Prince is what I call a unicorn in the space. You're a unique resource. And so, to have the opportunity to kind of chat with you about the challenges that you were facing at the time, and, recognizing the impact that you have on the channel was important to me. And I was just happy to be involved.
I feel like you bring a lot of credibility to direct sales. So particularly if someone's listening to this and they either don't understand direct sales, or it's not, or they maybe have a bias, maybe a negative bias. But you came from a law background. Walk them through that, and I think built this incredible company, took it public. I know you don't like to brag about yourself, but just you went from law to fell in love with this sales channel, and then build an incredible career around it.
I mean, I so avoided the channel for so many years. You know, my good friend Blake Roney, who's the founder of New Skin, we were college roommates, right? And basically did everything together. And when we both graduated from BYU at the same time, he said, "Hey, I'm going to go start a skincare company with my sister. You know, why don't you come and join us?" It's like, oh, no, dude. That's, skincare, lotion, not my thing. Direct selling, what you have in mind, not my thing. And so I went to law school and ended up practicing law for several years. But, it's just life circumstances, isn't it? That gets us all here to where we recognize the beauty of this platform. I mean, for me, I knew 6 weeks after starting to practice law that it was not how I wanted to spend my life. I mean, I found myself on the floor of my office one night doing an all-nighter, taking a company public. And the guy who I was working with, my mentor in the practice, walked by and he looks at me laying on the floor and he goes, You okay? I go, yeah, no, I don't know. My heart's racing. He looks at me, you'll get used to it. And he just kind of walks off. And I'm literally on the floor of my office thinking to myself, no amount of money is worth killing yourself so that other people can get rich. And that's what I felt like I was doing as a lawyer. So I knew that wasn't for me, but still, fast forward 6 years, I've been practicing law for quite a long time and had an opportunity to go run a small business. And all the way along, I'm doing work for the New Skin principals. I'm seeing their success. Blake would invite me to conventions, and I would sit like on the top row of the Delta Center watching this spectacle unfold, just going, man, this is so different than what I do for a living. Couldn't, in my wildest dreams, fathom being involved in it, but they had invested in a small company that was selling products through traditional retail channels, so Kmart and Walmart. And they talked me into leaving my law practice to go run that company, which I was happy to do because I knew the law wasn't for me in the long run. And thought that, yeah, this is awesome, man. We're going to sell products to Walmart. Life's good. But then you get involved there and you're talking to the 25-year-old buyer at Walmart who holds the future in the palm of his hands, who literally makes you or breaks you. And he called me up one January after a big Christmas promotion and goes, "Hey, I've got 50% of your inventory here. I need to return it to you." And I'm going, "What?" It was millions of dollars of inventory. And he goes, "No, you don't understand. You either take it back or you never do business with Walmart again." And I go, "Okay, we're not taking it back." And that's life with Walmart, right? They'll buy a big chunk of whatever your product is, mess it up at the store level, and have the right to send it all back. And so it kind of took exposure for me to a traditional retail channel to open my mind to the beauty of what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're in front of the consumer, talking to the consumer directly. Who else does that? You don't do that through a print ad or through a TV ad or through a newspaper ad or through an infomercial. You're not talking to the consumer. And so I took No Skin public in '96, thinking I would just do that and move on to the next project. And I did. I fell in love with the business. It's a platform unlike any other. It's a family unlike any other. It's an incredibly powerful way to take innovation to the marketplace. And I just love that. I still, even with the advent of social media platforms and true nothing but affiliate marketing mechanisms, there is no better way to explain to a consumer innovation and what's really different about your products than through what we do.
And you took them, from 700 million to 3.2 billion. I mean, over the period of the 14 plus years that you ran as CEO,
Yep,
had to have done tens of billions combined. I mean, it was a very significant business all over the world, and served as the chairman of both the DSA and the WFDSA, the World Federation of Direct Selling. So I just feel like you've become. I feel like the term legend is thrown out in our space. It's a little cliche and like a little lame, but I feel like you actually are one of the true legends of our space that bring a lot of credibility and a lot of authority to what we do. And one thing you said to me that kind of fired me up, you said you felt like this channel you fought so hard for, fought on Wall Street for it. And you know, you were like, where did all the leaders go? You know, you felt like it needed the next generation of not only just of leaders, but of model. Like, God, let's go forge the future, not just preserve the past. And that was one of the things that resonated with me, that turned into what we're doing with Make, you know?
Yeah.
So
the first generation of direct selling leaders had phenomenal success, got rich, got old, and do what people do, you know, when they age or they get rich, they relax, they step away. And our platform is struggling because of that. And so, you know, we have an opportunity to, I think, be the new market leader in our space.
Yeah. So Jay and I met, you know, 13 years ago. I'd sold my direct selling distributorship. And so I was actually out of direct sales at this point. And I was doing some consulting for this private equity group. And one of the portfolio companies they owned, he ran. And I remember meeting him. I was like, oh, this dude's freaking sharp, dude. And he's just a sharp dude. And then I went in 13 years ago to help to transform a 25-year-old kind of failing, you know, direct sales company. And I'm talking to the CEO, one of my partners, and I was like, we got to get someone just like that Justin Sarah guy, young, fired up, sharp, articulate, driven, you know, ethical, just like we named all of these things, just like him. And finally one day I was like, why don't we just go talk to him, you know, specifically? And man, that partnership over the last, you know, we've done billions in revenue together. And, you know, it's so funny. It's like you became like a blood brother. It's like you became someone that, like, you know, I talked to, you know, probably more than my wife. You know, we just were on the phone multiple times a day and trying to solve the business's problems. I was kind of we both came in as minority equity partners into that business, but really I was kind of running the sales side. You were kind of, you know, helping to running the corporate side, and travel all over the world together and the whole thing. And we really fought hard for that business, you know, and we did a lot of, you know, created a model that really, I thought, moved direct selling forward, you know? So share with us your intro into this world, a little bit of your background, but your intro into direct selling, and then, you know, how we got connected, and because that's going to pick up into the lead into all this.
Well, it's actually really interesting because Truman and my story actually have some similar intersections in that I kind of came up through traditional business and through traditional selling. Two-step distribution is what we called it. So, you know, company has a brand, develops a product, and they go find distribution through, you know, two-step distribution. So a Walmart, Target, Costco, all of these would be considered two-step distribution, meaning they buy your product at wholesale and now they're selling it at retail, right? So that's the model of distribution that most products are probably sold through around the world. Well, except now that the e-commerce is here, that's definitely changed things. But certainly back, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that was the case. And so I had a similar experience, went through working with companies that were building brands, very hyper-focused on what consumer needs were, what consumer trends were. And that's ultimately how you made a sale into a Walmart or a Costco or these distributions, is you showed them that you had the product that consumers wanted, their consumers would want. And ultimately, that's how you get that deal done. So I learned early on the real value and power of understanding consumers and consumer trends. And then kind of, you know, as life would have it, got introduced to a company. They were actually looking for somebody to run the manufacturing for their company. And that's actually where I grew up in the industry, was actually on the manufacturing supply chain side. And so this company, this kind of smaller startup company, I didn't know anything about direct sales. I didn't know anything about network marketing. And they had me come in, and I saw the trajectory or the scale with which this company was growing. And I was like, what is happening? Because in traditional kind of business, the scale or the rate at which these companies can scale is literally unheard of. And so I saw this company and their growth path. I thought, wow, this is a company I'd like to be involved in. So I came in as an executive to do supply chain, and similar to Truman, just fell in love with it. Like that experience of working with a buyer at a big box retailer was really I mean, it was satisfactory in the sense that, you were helping to build a nice company and your employees, you were helping to secure their job, but you never had any connection to the end user. And so when I started to see what was happening in this space where those consumers, you're like one step from those consumers, you can really see the impact of your products. But ultimately, what the bug that bit me was seeing the impact it had on individuals' lives that were able to go out and make these sales. And, I think there's maybe a, stigma or, whatever you want to call it about the direct selling industry, that you have kind of all of these, a couple of rich people at the top and everybody else is struggling. That's not the experience that I saw. I saw a lot of people who were able to make a few $100 a month or part-time income. And for those families, that was critical income. That meant, we were able to make our bills this month or we weren't, or we were able to take a vacation as a family or we weren't, or my kids were able to be in private school or they weren't. Like those are the real life-changing things that I saw, even just small amounts of income that were coming into these households do. And so that's the bug that bit me. Like I fell in love with that part of it. I fell in love with just these really honest, good, hardworking people that they were willing to roll up their sleeves. Again, that stigma of kind of a get rich quick scheme is not my experience at all. I found people that were like, I want to roll up my sleeves. I'm willing to work hard. Just tell me what to do, and I'm ready to do it. And so I loved it. Got bit by the bug. Was now in the industry, and as they say, you kind of you guys can probably relate to this. You go through a few years of doing something, and your die is a little bit cast. So I went for a few years in the industry and kind of realized either I'm going to stay in this industry and that's going to be my career for the rest of my kind of professional life, or I can go back into the traditional business side and that can be kind of my life. And for me, I said, let's figure out how to do some unique things to where maybe the ick factor that kind of came along with some of that, like we could do it actually different to where you could take all of that good and do it in a way that nobody had ever done before and do something really amazing. And those were the seeds of the business that you and I, worked on together. So I was working with this private equity company that owned a few companies. If I recall right, you were consulting with them on one of their other portfolio companies. And I was over here running this company. And there was some intersection to where they said, hey, maybe we ought to get all these guys in the same room and maybe, we can figure out how to scale these businesses. So I remember walking into that boardroom and the first thing I remember is who's the guy with the biceps? Like, like, this guy is like, he's fit. I mean, we have kind of a saying around here, he's a gym bro. I was like, oh man, freaking gym bro over here. But I mean, it didn't take but just a few minutes to realize, yes, your personal fitness is a very important thing to you, but man, as down to earth, as approachable, as easy to talk to and connect with as anybody. And so I think we just became kind of fast friends in the sense that our values aligned. I think we both had that, especially at that time in our careers. Like, I think people see you now and they think, oh, born with a silver spoon. Like, not the case. Like, we were young and we were hungry and, we were driving beaters and trying to figure out how to, make the next payment on our mortgage, just like everybody is, right? And so we were young, hungry guys, and just kind of had that connection of like, we really had the drive to go do something amazing, and maybe even didn't even know what that was going to look like, but just had that confidence of we're going to go do something in the world, And so that's where that relationship got forged, and ultimately a couple of years later is when we ultimately got the chance to work together as real partners in that business.
Yeah. Yes, but that business, so it's a company called Mōdere. We created a model called social retail, and over like the next basically decade, we acquired about 5 million customers, did $2.5 billion in revenue, and it in many ways it kind of moved the direct sales channel forward. People were like, "Dang, these guys are getting a lot of customers." It was kind of a new model, new way of doing it, and that's going to lead into the end of that, because the end of that ultimately now, I say our business is forged in fire. So at that point, we were owned by a private equity group, and I'll kind of tee this up, and then we can kind of go through. And by the way, this will be the first time I've ever even talked about this stuff out loud, at least publicly. But in the end of 2021, we built the business to about $500 million a year. in revenue and annual revenue, and the equity group levered up the company with a ton of debt. So if you're hearing that, don't know what that means. Basically, they pulled out a huge chunk of cash for themselves, and then they put the debt on the company.
It'd be like taking out a home equity loan on your house, and just using that money in some other way.
Somewhere.
Yeah, none of it stayed in the company.
Yes. So when that happened, 2022, it was kind of the end of the COVID boom anyway. There's some macro things, but then when revenue softened, it put the company in kind of a precarious financial situation. And then the rest of 2023, I was the number one earner. I kind of overrode, as it will, most of the revenue of the company, probably 95 or 8% of it, something like that. So I could, you're kind of watching your revenue go down as my point. And man, just fighting for it. This is so 2023, January, first week of January is when we kind of reconnected. So I was just fighting and clawing of like, trying to think of innovations and stuff. And you felt like sometimes you were trying to swim upstream in a raging river, But man, I love that business, but most importantly, I love those people, in this community you build, and just so you're just trying to fight for it. And then in the fall, in August of 23, they flew us out to Newport Beach, and basically said, it was so interesting that the guy that was representing the private equity group, he sits us down and he says, all right, business is in a dire situation. Here's kind of what's going on. He goes, we need to make, and they list up, I think it was like 13 different cuts. And these were huge cuts. Just cut after cut after cut after cut. Comp plan cut, this. Longer shipping, just the whole thing. And now remember, revenue's already been going down for almost 2 years consecutively. So the field confidence is really fragile at this point. And he says, you guys are here, take as much time as you need. I got another meeting, and, good luck. Justin, you're here, Justin Prince, you're here to message this to the field, and you guys figure out the plan, and we'll see you later. And he stands up. He's been in there for like 2 minutes. I said, hey, real quick. I said, would it be helpful at all if I kind of gave you the temperature of the field? It's kind of what's happening. And he goes, looks at his watch, and he goes, well, I got like 3 minutes or something like that. I go, dude, it'll take me 2 minutes. So you're good. I mean, I'm like, all these families' lives, and you got 3 minutes. I just wanted to felt so disconnected. And I said, first of all, the confidence in the field is really low. Second of all, I still think we could return this thing around. I said, if we could, like, in other words, we've got a bunch of great leaders. I'm like, if we could maybe infuse it with some new cash or some new ideas, I think we could turn this thing around. I said, but if we do all of those things that you said, we had like 3 weeks to implement all 13 cuts. I said, if we do all 13 of those in the next 3 weeks and just basically ram it in, I said, I think that the business will be half this size in the next few months. I just was like, I'm happy to do what you guys, whatever, but it's just like, just so you know, this is not going to go well. And the field's not going to accept this well. And he goes, well, okay, well, you figure it out. And by the way, I also felt like there was a weird dynamic of the corporate team versus like almost like a positioning of, remember they were saying to me, hey, will you write an email of your fears that you're feeling and the stress that you're feeling from the field's perspective? Almost like people are trying to all jockey for the power of, the narrative or whatever. And that was in August. September, they were pulling us to Vegas and stuff to try and solve it. We're trying to figure out some plans to solve it. And I felt like we got to a point, I remember saying to you, and we left one of those meetings, I said to you, I felt like the way I would describe it is that we were going to be the fall guys. I even said to you once, I was like, I think they're setting us up to be the ones that like they can hang this on. I go, man, it makes you feel so uncomfortable because I just didn't feel like that was obviously we were fighting for it. And I felt like that was like, you could almost sniff it, a little bit. So I remember going home, and my wife was up north. We live in southern Utah. She was up in Salt Lake City for her sister's baby shower. And I remember I couldn't sleep that night. When I say I couldn't sleep, I didn't like kind of sleep and not sleep. I just didn't sleep at all. I just couldn't sleep. About 4 a.m, I finally get up. I'm like, dude, you're not sleeping. Just get up. I went for a walk, took my dog on a walk, and I bawled my eyes out like snot bubbles. Like, good thing it was 4:30 a.m. My neighbors couldn't see. Because I just remember thinking, this incredible business we built, all of these families that you care so much about, all these people that you've worked with, this thing is on the verge of death. And it's like on a platform, a foundation that's just on the verge of death. Man, that was a stressful time. I mean, I was, talking to Sherman, I was like, how do you handle this? What do you do? What do you do? And you think through what is the right way to handle it. Because on one hand, I thought, do you tell your leadership team, these people that you've worked so hard with, that we're in a tough spot. If you do tell them, that's probably going to stress them out because you're stressed out. I mean, you're bawling your eyes out at 4 a.m. If you don't tell them and the company goes away, they're going to be like, you're the worst leader in the world. Like who knows the Titanic is sinking and doesn't say anything, you know? So it's one of those great leadership dilemmas of how do you handle this appropriately?
And where does your loyalty lie?
Where does your loyalty lie, you know? And it was a really, really tricky time, a really tricky leadership moment to say, what should you do and how do you handle it? And ultimately, we pulled in, we did a small meeting with the kind of the advisory type leaders and just said, look, we're in a tough spot. I think we can get through it. Will we get through it? I don't know. But here, the only way through it is through it. I remember telling Truman, I was like, I kind of finally came to, after kind of saying, how do you handle this? What do you do to protect all these families? Basically, I was like, I think the best thing I can do is just hunker down and make this business work. See if we could salvage it, basically. And no kidding, I think I said that to you on October 11th, right before I went to New York for fall break. It was just kind of like, I just think that's the right thing to do, is just hunker down and see if we can like ride it out, but hopefully pull it out, you know? But other companies have been through tough times. And we landed in New York for fall break. And I just happened to be on the phone with Truman. And my little girls are in the back seat. And I check my emails. And I get an email from one of the biggest law firms in America that says, you're terminated and we're suing you. Basically, an impending lawsuit. I'm on the phone. I go, I just got terminated. And Truman goes, what? I go, yeah, I just got terminated. He goes, you're kidding me, right? And I go, I don't think so. My little girls are in the back seat. My little girl goes to her sister. She goes, what does terminated mean? You know, my little daughter, Lexi. And her older sister goes, I think it means Dad got fired from this company. And my little girl goes, I thought Dad was the company. Like, what is happening, you know? We're pulling into the hotel. And what was your comment or what was your take at that point?
I mean, the irony of that to me was that before you opened that email on the call, what I'm hearing from you is, I'm going to figure out how to save this ship. You know, I've got to figure out how to save this ship. You know, we've got to pull out all the stops to save that ship, save this ship. Oh, hold on. I think I just got terminated. I mean, it was like, I mean, I will forever think of it as the single biggest mistake in the history of the direct selling channel. I mean, who terminates their top sales leader without a phone call? I mean, it's like, it's unfathomable to me that they would do it at all, let alone do it out of the blue. You know, it's just dirty.
So to pick this up, I get a call waiting, and it's Justin Sarah. And I go, hold on one sec. I click, and he goes, you're not going to believe this. I just got terminated. At the same moment, right? They push send to both of us. He didn't know at this point I've been terminated. And I could hear the stress in your voice of like, what is happening? You know? So I don't know. I've even asked you, how did that happen for you? How were you processing?
Yeah, I remember that pretty vividly. So I was actually driving, and I just want to make sure everybody's clear. You should never check your emails while you're driving. But I was driving, and I happened to pull up this email on my phone, and like I almost thought like, oh, it's a mistake or something. And then like you read it again, and you're like, no, this is addressed to me, and they're saying you know, by the way, so people understand. So I was an executive, right? So I was an employee of the company as an executive. You, Justin Prince, were an independent, you know, rep being paid. So basically as a consultant to the company, just so people kind of understand the dynamics. So
as a 1099.
Right. So as we were both terminated, but those terminations meant different things because I was technically an employee and you were technically a 1099, right? So mine was saying you basically have been terminated for cause, which basically means as an employee to be terminated for cause, that's a hard thing to do. You actually have to be like trying to get terminated for cause, because it basically means you know, gross negligence, you know, you're willfully trying, you're trying to, so when I read that you're being terminated for cause, I'm like, where is this coming from? And so the first thing that I thought was exactly the conversation that we had a few months ago of this kind of concern or fear that maybe there was this idea that we needed some scapegoats. And I thought, exactly right. Exactly right. That we've just become the scapegoats. And so and to your point, like, that's scary. It's really scary to all of a sudden just have that ripped away. And again, by the same token, you're going to be sued, basically. Um, so for me, that was very, very scary, a scary situation. At the same time, I've got this kind of fighter in me that was kind of like, oh, hell no. They like, we know where the bodies are buried. So you guys have messed with the wrong people, and here's the thing that was kind of frustrating for me a little bit just kind of circling back to this, like, where does the loyalties lie? I think I was feeling the same way, because here, yes, as a corporate executive, my ultimate responsibilities are to the company, to the corporation, right? But you still have ethics, and you still have values, and so it's like, how do you balance all of those things? So here I've created these very meaningful and important relationships, not the least of which was to you, but to others in the field. And so it's like, how do you balance that in there? I have a team of other employees that work for me on my team who rely on this income. I have a responsibility to the person I report to in the executive. I have a responsibility to these board, the shareholders. Like, how do you navigate all of these things when you kind of know what you know? And ultimately, the frustrating thing for me was the indictment was really around contemplating, should there be a plan B, right? So to use your analogy, use the analogy, I think, of the sinking Titanic. It's like, okay, wait a minute, the Titanic is sinking. Like, first responsibility is, let's figure out how to try to save the ship. But it's probably a good idea to know where the rescue boats are, just in case, right? And it's almost like the indictment was, because you asked where the rescue boats were, we're just going to throw you overboard now. That's what it felt like to me, to use that analogy. And so it was a little bit of a scary time. It's one thing to be sued when you're part of a company and the company is there to back you up, is a totally different thing to be sued when you're like, I only have so many funds to be able to defend myself against a company backed by a private equity company that has like millions upon millions. Like, that's a scary thing.
Yeah, it was extremely scary.
Well, and remember too that the context for this is your owners had borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars to put in their pockets. They had to explain to the people holding that debt why this company was struggling. There's the excuse right there.
Yeah. And again, I think part of the situation that we were in, I think the reason that happened as abruptly as it happened is because ultimately, I'm speaking for myself, and I think speaking for you based on what we saw, we weren't willing to put those ethics aside.
I wasn't going to tell someone that everything was fine when I knew everything wasn't fine. I didn't,
exactly,
I couldn't do it.
And I think that
I didn't have to go through all of the confidential stuff, but I also wasn't going to lie to people.
Yeah, and I think that it was a little bit surprising to me, because I think that that financial world that maybe some of those people came from, that was just the way things were done, and we're over here saying no, like, I don't agree with that. And, this is being reported to, a bank, that's owed this debt. And no, I don't agree with that. And I think as soon as the realization of, I don't know if Justin Prince and Justin Sarah are going to play ball, then you're on the outs.
You're on the outs. Yeah. So that night I go into by the way, you still don't know I'm terminated. It wasn't until I got up into my hotel room. You're like, man, I'm just, I'm processing with you all of your stress and fear. And finally I was like, hey, I got terminated too. And you go, what? You got terminated too? And go, yeah. And you're like, what are these guys thinking? Like, it's one thing to terminate me, to terminate both of us. And
it was a surreal moment. I mean, it really was.
And it was, to your point, it was terrifying.
Also, the day before your commission check of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly right. Day before your check. To your point, it's a large commission check, hundreds of thousands of dollars of commissions, no phone call, bam, And so I'm sitting there in my room, My wife's, she's stressed. She's like, what does this mean? Are we going to be sued? What does it mean? She's stressed. And I'm trying to act cooler than I was. I was really stressed. I almost wanted to burst into tears. I'm also pissed. And I'm also like confused. And I'm also like, how did this, anyway, it's just this whole range of emotions. And I had a headache. I had a cold, I had that drainage down the back of your throat. I was just like trying to swallow. I was like, oh my gosh. I order my kids' room service. And I'm on the phone, my attorneys, and it's maybe 10 o'clock at night there, so it's 8 o'clock back home. Attorneys, and I'm trying to like process it. One thing I was so grateful for with Truman, one of Truman's great skills is he's very level, and so I was very like, you're feeling all these emotions. He was very smart, very level, and I go into my kids' room. So this is the best way I can liken it to you. Maybe I was doing this just so I felt better or something, but I go in my kids' room. So when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, they thought if they took out the Pacific Fleet, they could actually fly the next round of fighters all the way to the mainland. And so if you ever watch the movie, there's this kind of famous scene where they come back and they say to General Yamamoto, they say, sir, it was an incredible success, caught by surprise, took out the fleet. And they said, now you can send the next flight. And he said, don't send it. And they go, sir, no, it worked. What do you mean don't send it? And he said, I fear all we have done is awoken a sleeping giant and filled it with terrible resolve. And that's how I felt. I was like, I just felt this burn. I was like, you freaking suckers, dude. I can't believe this just happened. And the betrayal, I was just like, oh my gosh, just burned into me. In fact, I feel it even right now. I was telling you guys this. And I sat down with my kids and I just go, I want you to know something. I was just like, your dad's a fighter. I'm like, I'm going to fight back. And I said, I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to stand up for our family. And I said, I'm freaking going to fight back. You guys watch. And I go, they picked the wrong guy. And my little girls are like eating their French fry, looking at me like, oh my gosh, Dad, calm down. And, like he's pretty serious right now. And I remember our hotel was next to Central Park. And I'd go walk at Central Park. 'Cause I didn't want my wife to hear all the stress I was feeling. I'd call you. And I'm like, what the heck? So it was like all these processing, like, therapy sessions, like, are you okay? And there's times when you weren't okay, and then I was like, we got this, bro. And at this point I didn't know what we were going to do. People, I think what their allegation was at the time, this was on a Thursday night at late, they said that they were under the assumption we were launching a company on Monday. This is Thursday night. On Monday, I was like, I'm flying home from New York on Monday. What are we talking about? It's just somehow this rumor mill had spun out of control. And one of the things I've learned since, I'm a little bit more sophisticated now and can kind of see what was happening now. But there's basically a divide and conquer. It's like I go to you and I play on your fear and I play on your greed. So your fear is, if you don't play ball with me, I'm going to cut you out too. The greed is, by the way, he had all these teams and lines. Someone's got to absorb this. So you play on both for people. And so you start pulling people away, and those, like, if you'll turn. And so all these people started that were you thought were dear friends, swam in your pool, ate your food, been with your kids, the whole thing over a decade plus, just turned. And it was just painful, just a painful experience. I remember I get a call from Mandy. I'm sitting at Hamilton, the play in New York. I didn't really sleep that whole weekend. I was up writing, trying to prepare my lawsuit, just obviously the stress. And I remember we were at Hamilton. It's right before it starts, literally right before they open the curtains. And I get a call, and it's Mandy Cloward, who I'd worked with for 10 plus years.
Yeah. So Mandy was my like kind of right hand woman, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep. She picks up, and first thing she says, she goes, trust no one. I go, okay, what's up? And she goes, there's a lot of people on that Zoom when they announced this that should have been bawling their eyes out. And they weren't bawling their eyes out. And there was a few that were just in tears because they did, so they weren't part of whatever, And man, it was just a painful time. I want to actually fast forward about 2 weeks. No, yeah, about 10 days. So they start settlement talks on your suit. Because you'd paid whatever. Do you remember what your bill was the first week? Wasn't it 15 or 10 or 15? I mean, in other words, you're starting into a burn.
Oh, you burned cash like nobody's business. And believe me, I only had one attorney working on my deal, and I was lighting cash on fire. I was like, holy cow, you know?
So the point is at some point you can't have weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and years and months of 15 grand a week. It just isn't going to be good. long story short, they started to settlement with yours, because with yours, I think that when they got access to the information that you had, I think they're kind of like, let's maybe just settle this thing.
Yeah, the context was like, again, you're making these allegations. So the legal system in suing people, actually, what oftentimes it is, it's not actually about like, hey, you harmed me and you owe me this money. It's actually about lawsuits are public, so let's create a narrative. So oftentimes the law or lawsuits are used to write a narrative. So in my opinion, that's what was happening with us. This was being used to write a narrative. So the allegations that were being made about Justin Prince and Justin Sarah, somehow we were responsible for the fact that this company was in trouble, was this new narrative that was trying to be spun through the legal system, okay, because those are public. And so what happened was, it's, A, I'm pretty detail oriented, B, I'm a fairly good note taker, but the real big thing is, kind of like you and I were saying, we started to like the spidey senses a little bit, like a couple of months before, and you just could already tell that maybe you couldn't trust some people. And so my like documentation even went to the next level. So our kind of first little evidentiary hearing was kind of slated, and you have to turn over your evidence before you go into that hearing. So they kind of turned over the stuff that was saying, this is our proof that he's doing all these things. And it was laughable. I mean, it was a joke. Like, and then I'm like, well, here's my evidence showing these things are false. And that's when the phone rang, like, maybe we should talk settlement,
So as part of that settlement, their attorneys are your attorneys. So now you can share this, because I think it again ties into what's happened with our careers. I get a call from you, and you basically said, hey, they want to settle, which I was like, man, good for you, congratulations. I wish they were calling me saying, let's settle too. Mine what the evidential hearings were being pushed, so mine wasn't in that, like, yours was almost going faster. And you said basically part of their settlement, like what they want, was for you to turn on me. And the language was, we want him to stick a knife in Prince's ribs and twist.
Yeah. Obviously that wasn't written in any of the settlement documents, but this was the conversation that was happening. Basically trying to turn me to say, okay, we'll just hang it all on Prince, but basically you've got to help us do this now. So you have to turn on that. And it was, you can imagine the roller coaster ride. So this, like, you're cruising along, you're terminated out of the blue, so you're as low as it gets, you're starting to spend all this money you don't have to have and then they start talking settlement. So all of a sudden I'm like, holy cow, dude, this could be done. And then they started having these conversations, and my heart just sank. It sank lower than the lowest point, because you're basically saying, they're asking me to not only lie, but turn on somebody who's a dear friend of mine, who I trust implicitly. And this like hope that maybe the end is in sight almost like vanished in front of my eyes. And it was just like the gut punch of all gut punches, And so I called you, because there's no way on the earth.
Well, before you get into that though, let me say this. When you called me and you're walking through, like, here's what they want me to stick a knife in your ribs and twist. I remember I was on a walk, and I remember thinking to myself, dang, even him, even he's going to have to turn. And I thought to myself, I was about to say to you on the phone, listen, man, you got a family and you got to do what you got to do. I almost just like, I'll take everyone else's turn, you can turn. And instead you go, I wouldn't sell my integrity for any amount of money. You go, I'm not going to, basically, I won't perjure myself and lie, and I wouldn't sell my integrity for any amount of money. And I freaking burst into tears. I was like, someone like actually had integrity to say, I'd rather fight than.
I'd rather be bankrupt and live in a cardboard box than have sold it. And again, it wasn't just that settlement was going to go away. I mean, that was a chunk of money that they were really willing to be like, no, not only are we going to stop, we're going to actually pay you a grip of cash. And so that was a big, like, it's almost like, it's like I've also never been offended so much where I'm like, you actually thought I would do that? Like, you brought this to me thinking I would do that you don't know me, is how I felt about it.
Well, I've had I've had revealing moments. This is one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be in business with both you guys. So revealing moments to me are when someone who they really are is revealed to you. And it's like the prodigal son's brother wasn't revealed, all of his jealousies, all of his envies, all of his insecurities until the prodigal returned. Then it was revealed. Or Judas wasn't revealed to Jesus until the pressure was on, and the silver was offered. Or, Brutus was the number 2 in command of the Roman Empire. He was Julius Caesar's best friend, and it was just his number 1 in command, his dearest friend. And the famous last words of Julius Caesar are "Et tu, Brute," according to Shakespeare, which says, "You too, Brutus," because he stabbed in the last stab. Like you too, like you turned on me too. He was revealed, and I felt like I met you guys. That's why I said forged in fire. I met you in the fire, and man, what a blessing that you meet people when the chips are down. And by the way, I feel like you guys met me too. I mean, you saw me at my freaking lowest, and a lot of our top affiliate leaders, I met them. And they met me during, when the chips were down. I think it's one of the reasons our company has been so strong is because we fought through a really challenging time. Some of them came to us when they were going through fires, and we were all forged together, and it purified out, the people that weren't supposed to be with us. I'll wrap up that section by saying this. They went through 4 law firms. We won every hearing, every motion. It's just, to your point, remember the judge said, in one of them, Mōdere's provided, this was his quote, "Mōdere's provided no evidence the prince was starting." It was just, I was like, oh my gosh, this whole thing. And to your point, they had the narrative out there, but you want to know what's so interesting? I remember asking myself once, thinking to myself, kind of in a dark moment, I remember thinking, did these guys just crush me? Did they create a narrative that would go out in the public and they would just crush you? Like, your career's over. And it was honestly the flip. Because I think people watch and they're like, this is such bullcrap, and this is so dirty how these guys are doing this guy, that I'm more with him than with them. So it's just one of those purifying things. And I'll share this. It's like those cliches of life's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And the cliches that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. It's true. It's like all this weight, all this emotional weight, I felt like it strengthened my shoulders. Like I got stronger, like I grew, versus it smashing me and ruining my career. It actually built me into a better version to serve and add value and lift people. So,
well, let me give just a quick little nuance too on just the lawsuit thing, because I think back in the day when all of this was going down, especially when I settled so quickly, I think there was a little bit of this oh well, Justin Sarah was clean, but Justin Prince clearly isn't because his lawsuit's still going on. And I want to explain that there's important context as to why that was. So remember, I'm an employee. So Utah's a right to work state. I can be terminated for any reason. Now, they claimed it was for cause, and that's part of what we had to rectify through that legal process and the settlement. But the claim that I had on the company for that was relatively small, okay? Justin Prince is an independent, he's building a business that he's put his sweat, time, and equity into that has value. So when they terminate somebody for that, the liability to you was massive, tens of millions of dollars. So the reality is they could settle for me for very small dollars because my claim was so small as an employee. They couldn't settle with you because your claim was too big. Your claim was so big that it would have sunk them in that moment. And so they literally had no choice but to keep it alive. It's part of the reason they went through all these law firms, because I think these in the law firms were like, what are we doing? This is a joke. They just had no choice but to keep it alive because the claim was so big. And so it had nothing to do with truth or fiction or right or wrong.
Maybe it was that, but I recall too that, Prince went out of his way to try to settle it
multiple times
on the most reasonable terms you could even imagine. Yes. And they wouldn't even pay attention to it.
They needed the narrative.
I think that's what was driving them.
They needed the narrative for sure.
Yeah, I told my attorneys, I go, my winning is not in court, meaning this settlement, $50 million. I was like, get me back in the marketplace, dude. As cliche as this sounds, I almost felt like Maverick and Top Gun. He's like, get me in a plane. I was like, get me back in a plane, dude. Just freaking let me go do what I do. And just this whole legal bullcrap is not where I shine. Get me back with people again, Man, that was a wild ride, and that was a painful ride. And one of the stipulations of one of my contracts said I couldn't prepare to compete for 3 months. And I'm kind of a creative dude and kind of a high energy guy and whatever. And you're kind of always thinking of ideas, I call you every night. Dad, I got 15 more ideas. And so, to not be able to, so you have no income, you're spending $100,000 a month to defend yourself. All you talk about all day is this lawsuit strategy. I'm just like, oh my gosh, you've lost your whole community. Your name's getting torn through the mud. They like grab your head and run you through the public square. We found his head, that they're trying to hang you as the villain. And then you can't even prepare to do your life for the next, it was like a depressing time. It was just a really, really tricky time.
Well, and that, but I think you also were asking yourself some really deep questions like, why would I ever want to do this?
100%.
I don't want to do this again.
100%.
Right? I mean, you were asking just really root level questions. How am I going to spend the rest of my life?
Even deeper than that, I was like, can I trust people again? You feel like your circle gets really tight. You know what was interesting? I was on a walk, and I hope this is helpful for someone listening.
You take a lot of walks, by the way.
Oh, dude, that's how I process, dude. That's how I freaking process. I went through 2 pairs of shoes just walking. So I'm on a walk, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to trust anyone again. Like, I'm just going to keep my circle super, super, super tight, like never let anyone come to my house, like super tight. And I remember thinking, my superpower, like Superman's ability to fly, my superpower is that people may not believe what I believe, but they'll believe that I believe what I believe. Like, I have an authenticity and like a force of like, I don't know if I agree with you, but you're freaking convicted on this thing, And I remember thinking, if I let the people that betrayed me, if I give them that gift of where I don't, because I'm a very trusting person, or in fact, too trusting, but if I give them that power, then they actually do. Superman can't fly anymore. It's like you lose your cape, And I was like, no, I would rather run the risk of getting hurt again, which is inevitable when you work with humans. I'd rather run the risk of getting hurt again and go have your superpowers, which is your conviction with people and your authenticity and your pull, than allow that pain to be so significant and allow them to have that influence in my life where they took my ability to fly, But man, those are real questions you have to process through.
And I think that kind of takes us back a little bit to the platform kind of in the industry itself. Like you were saying, questioning the industry. And I remember having a conversation with you kind of during this space. And by the way, I got introduced to Truman kind of during this time too. So now I'm terminated. So now Truman's basically, he's therapist for both of us. And, we're having 3-way counseling sessions, it seems like, more often than not. But that conversation did come up a lot because I think, what they didn't realize was, I think by terminating us, all they did was drive us closer together to go do something. Right. I mean, you and I had worked together long enough that I knew that I wanted to do something with you. And so I think we were more just talking about what is that thing going to be more than do we want to work together, but what do we want to go do? And I remember having a conversation with you kind of in that early time period. There's enough contacts and enough, goodwill and other things. We could have gone and done a lot of things. Remember that we were talking about, maybe direct to consumer, maybe we go build something there. You were talking, hey, maybe I should go in just kind of on the speaking side or teaching, or maybe just, real estate, or maybe start just kind of a little PE firm ourselves kind of a thing. And I just remember having this conversation with you about just what you were put on earth to do. Yeah. And like your God-given ability and just what's your highest and best use. And I just thought, I couldn't get it out of my head when we were having these conversations that every time we talk about one of those things, I just kept thinking, dude, that is not his highest and best use. Your highest and best use is like inspiring people to change their lives and doing, and then providing the vehicle to do it. So I'm just like, there's no other option. We just have to figure out how to do it.
So let me fast forward, because here's the thing. I think we got to that place. I got to a place, I felt like you and I, Truman, had to be like, do you even want to have anything to do with this sales channel again?
Yeah,
I think,
it just wasn't clear for any of us, was it?
Yes. You're in this point, you're retired. You don't need the freaking headache.
Yeah.
You've already done extremely well for yourself. Why would you even want to come goof around? I used to be like, why do you want to come out with us young, chumps over here? So, okay. So let me say this. Once I think we got to a point of like, I do want to work with you, I trust you, and I do want to use those gifts to serve people. So you got those two things. The third thing was, what product are you going to do? And dude, we went through 100
Physics.
iterations, of just trying to figure something out. Maybe 100's a little bit of exaggeration, but a ton of iterations.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I thought through some interesting ones, some kind of cool, interesting ones, but nothing where it was just like, man, this is something special. I remember I'm on a walk. Dude, I processed on the walks. I'm telling you, I'm on a walk. I'm on the phone with Truman. And I said, have you ever heard of peptides? And anyone that knows Truman, this is what I'll tell you about him. So IQ means how fast can you learn, how much can you retain? His IQ is off the freaking charts because he'll like go to the internet and like for the rest of us, like we read one article, like I'm kind of remember what it said. Truman's like dissected the whole internet in 24 hours. So he goes, I go, have you ever heard of peptides? And he goes, yeah. He goes, we had some peptides in some beauty products. And then I said, I think that they're like the future, dude. I said, I've been on peptides. It totally changed my health. I've been on for about 2 years. And I said, I think they're really powerful and whatever. So he goes, let me do some research. So I call him back the next day. I'll relay the story as I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
I call back the next day and he goes, did you do any research? He goes, you know what? I'm a little ticked off. And Truman's the most cool cucumber ever. I'm a little ticked off. And I go, why is that, Truman? He goes, because I worked with a company where we had
75
PhDs on staff. And we prided ourselves on being a highly innovative company, meaning we were finding the latest and greatest breakthroughs, spending, in one case, $100 million to bring the breakthrough to the company. Mm-hmm. And he said, we did tens of billions of dollars in sales. And he said, and we missed it. He goes, these peptides are that powerful. He goes, I just guess, he just did his internet scour. So tell me what hits you on the peptide space. And let's dive into that. Because to me, that's when all this started like being like, whoa, what if we could do something big here?
I mean, I had seen, as most people have, on social media platforms and whatnot, advertisements for the little vials, of peptides, and had never really experimented with them at all because they lacked a little bit of credibility to me at first blush, and the thought of, injecting yourself with substances that aren't necessarily prescribed by doctors didn't make a lot of sense to me. But when I started to do the research, I was blown away at what I was finding and the impact of peptides at the consumer level. So peptides, like you said, we had beauty products with peptides, but we never told the story. We never explained what peptides are and what they do. It's like we just threw a peptide in for an ingredient and said, hey, cool, peptides. We never told the story. And as I did my homework, and, honestly, one of the things that was really convincing to me was your before and after picture, right? I'm going, whoa.
Truman showed everyone my before and after picture they talked to.
Yeah, I mean, before and after pictures sell. And it worked with me. And so I did homework, started to explore the category a little more significantly, tried some peptides myself, and just became convinced that the marketplace is ripe for an explosion of this peptide science. It's who's the author, Justin? We were talking about. I'm going to space here on the idea that something that hits the billionaires,
Tim Ferriss was the one thing.
Tim Ferriss, looking at market trends.
Yeah.
Something that hits the billionaires, you keep your eye on those things because they're the people who are spending a lot of money on it.
It's almost like the
leading edge
into the
science.
Yeah.
And when something transitions from the billionaires to the millionaires, it's going to go mass. And peptides are right there right now. They're still, they're entering the mass marketplace, but they're still largely for people who are going to clinics, getting the blood tests, really under doctor supervision. And there's so much development, so much work going on in this space that I just thought, okay, this is cool.
So I want to dive into that because we looked at doing basically a synthetic peptide company.
Yeah.
So in other words, buying a compounding pharmacy, just doing that whole thing. Let's talk through why we didn't do that. This is, both of you, and then how we discovered these bioactive, these nature peptides, because that's when it started being like, whoa, we got something really special.
Yeah, synthetics work. The success of the GLP-1 drugs is a reflection of that. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people are losing millions of pounds on the GLP-1 drugs, which are just synthetic peptide products. And so, you know there's something there. You know there's some validity to the science. Man, there's a lot of unknowns there too. Like, who's really compounding these things? Are they made, what lab, where are they really being made? A lot of them probably coming into the U.S. from foreign markets, including China, right? How do you know what's going on in those labs? How do you know how pure these things are, and whether they're adulterated or whatever the situation may be? And then how do you know how to dose them? Nobody's telling you how to dose these things. And when you buy them, you have to promise that you're buying them not for human consumption, for research purposes only, for experimental use only. You sign your life away, when you buy synthetic peptides. Consumers are not doing the blood tests regularly to really track what's going on in their body. So they're complicated, they're expensive. You're injecting them for the most part, which I think consumers are, with the GLP-1s, they're probably getting a little more used to that, but I don't think anyone loves the idea of injecting themselves on a daily basis or multiple times a day. So, and based on my experience and just from a regulatory perspective, I look at that whole category and just go, okay, what's the likelihood that the FDA and the FTC allow these things to run in the marketplace without significant oversight and significant regulation? Not very high.
So I remember I was on a walk again, theme with the podcast. And I remember we were on the phone and you had found, through your research and scouring the internet, you'd found kind of this little interesting company that was had almost $100 million of VC money.
Yep.
They built this incredible AI technology. They had this really pretty amazing story, an amazing biotech technology story with natural peptides, and they had 14 views on their YouTube video. It was just kind of going nowhere. In a way, and I don't say that to put them down. I'm just saying they weren't telling. It was this incredible breakthrough story that wasn't being told.
Yeah, I mean, the breakthrough story is finding these chains of peptides in nature, in rices and in yeasts and in oats and in things that you can grow and control, extracting them from plants, embedding them in a matrix that enables us to run them through the gut instead of having to stick yourself and inject them on a daily basis. I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, when AI gets us to the point where we can identify these peptide chains in natural plant sources, who's going to complain about that, right? There is no regulatory issue when you're extracting these things from rice or from yeast. These are just natural ingredients found in nature. The problem is that when we eat them naturally through diet, our guts break them down fast because peptides are fragile. So they're destroyed in the gut before they can get into the bloodstream to deliver their message and say, do this, burn fat, build muscle, deep sleep, whatever the intended message is. And so when we ran into these labs who had been working on AI platforms for years and spent literally tens of millions of dollars, it's just, we knew they had a really compelling story and they didn't have a way to tell it.
Yeah. Remember we went to California, the group of us. We went to dinner. And honestly, I felt, I've never told you guys this. I felt kind of out of place a little bit. I didn't know for sure what my role was because I'd never done these kind of negotiations before. And I remember Truman turned to me at dinner and he said, Justin, what do you think is going to happen with this company if we make this partnership? I just thought, man, this isn't I think in this to myself, this isn't a very articulate way to say it, but I'm just going to tell these guys the way I really feel. I go, we're going to freaking smash it is if we do this, And they're looking at me like, okay, they're kind of scientists, kind of people. And they finally said to us, they go, why, with all due respect to you guys, they knew Truman's background, maybe mine, maybe me and Jay's, whatever. We not only have we not sold $1, I mean, all we had was like a slide deck or something.
Nor were we offering them $1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We weren't going to pay them anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we said, we want to be basically, and for our sales channel, your exclusive partner in this key peptide that you've spent $80 million developing and researching and finding and the whole thing. And they basically said, with all due respect, you guys have sold you sold no products. We have the big dogs. They had literally had some of the biggest dogs in the world in our sales channel, like multi-billion-dollar businesses, saying to them, "Hey, we'll tell your story. We'll tell your story." They said, should we go with you guys? Are a startup that sold nothing, And I thought your answer to him was so interesting. It was just one of those nostalgic moments looking back that really helped to kind of create what is now Make Wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you tell him?
I mean, I said, look, I ran one of those multi-billion-dollar companies, and let me tell you, they're not going to tell your story. They already have 50 other stories that they have to tell. And your story is going to get buried among all of the other stories that these companies think they're supposed to be telling. We're the ones who are going to fly your flag. We're going to tell your story. It's going to be front and center to everything we do. And, we had just enough credibility and just enough emotion to get them to bite.
Yeah, just enough logic, just enough emotion.
Well, let me tell you a story about that same dinner. So you guys have been at big dinners where it's like you end up having conversations around the table that are not the same conversation because there's just so many people, it's noisy, whatever. So these guys are having this conversation down on this end. I'm down on kind of on the other end of the table, and I've got a couple of the kind of scientist guys on my side. And I'll tell you, that was, I think that I had kind of this inkling of like, okay, there's something here. There's something amazing here. But I woke up to it during that conversation. Here's where that came from. So, Truman talks about the AI technology, and I think AI it's this buzzword now we just throw around. It's like, so what does that even mean? Like, why did that matter? Why does that unlock this power? And the conversation I was having with this scientist on the end, he asked me this question of like how many peptides do you think like exist out there in nature or whatever? And I was thinking, well, it's like, I've heard of the GLP-1 stuff, and like, I know insulin's a peptide. So I was like, I don't know, like a couple hundred maybe. Like I had no idea even what to say. So I was like, I'm going to go high and say a couple hundred because I know of two. And he said, there's billions of peptides that exist in nature. He said there's actually between 7 and 8 billion peptides that exist from natural sources. The plants, like everything that you see out there, has peptides built in it. They're the messengers to the cells, not only in humans, but in other organisms as well. And I said, billions. And then he said, how many peptides do you think are in the human body? Right. And I was like, I don't.
Receptors.
Right. Like how many different peptides exist in the human body that do what they do, that messaging like we talked about. And I was like, dude, I don't even know. Just tell me. So it was about 7,000. Okay. So what he said to me is he said the reason why this is so exciting is because what we've had prior to this is a math problem. So the reason why it's been unlocked is because the supercomputing and the AI technology has now allowed us to say, of these billions of peptides that exist out there, which ones look like they're going to match the 7,000 that work in the human body. And now we can point researchers and scientists in the right direction. So historically, it had just been needle in a haystack. Insulin, an accidental discovery. So that's what unlocks the power. So when you think about peptides as a platform, and I'm talking about the peptides that come from nature, like we use, the potential to have a platform that can cover hundreds, if not thousands of functions within the body exist. That's what got me excited. That's when I said, like, dinner's over, let's sign this deal, let's go. Like.
Also at that dinner, you remember the conversation where I was kind of chiding them a little bit for the fact that they were producing these relatively high quality videos that were literally getting 14 views on YouTube. And one of their scientists said something like, yeah, but that's $100 million problem. Thinking, oh, they need to raise another $100 million so that they can advertise their story, right? And my recollection is I said, no, that's a multi-billion-dollar problem, and that's what we're going to pay people to tell your story.
This is part of what I hope people get, because like you had kind of my passion, you had all three of our like passion to serve people and like future of wellness stuff, and then you also had this like we wanted to create economic opportunity. I think all three of us have a similar heart of like it just like does good for my soul to like watch these individuals and these families to change their economic situation, even if it's just those small little meaningful dollars. And the way that the model basically works is instead of paying that to Joe Rogan on a big podcast, or paying it to Meta on Facebook and Instagram ads, or, paying it to TikTok, for example, what you do is you basically say, listen, we'll pay about half, if we sell $1, about 50% will be paid in a marketing expense, but it'll be distributed to these people, these individuals and families. And so I remember thinking, and you said this to me, you said, Justin, I don't even want to do this this is when we're going through the product thing. You said, unless we can build a multi-billion-dollar platform, I don't want to do this, And if we go do $1 billion in revenue, $500 million is paid out approximately in commissions, in the marketing expense to these families, And that's when I remember thinking, we have a multi-billion-dollar platform, this peptide platform, this bioactive peptides. And what's so interesting, kind of fast forwarding 11 months later, we become the #1 bioactive peptide company on the planet, And, it's what I feel like we need to do is we need to have another session and actually tell the story from there, because that's
the startup story.
The startup.
This is the pre-startup story.
This is the prelude to the main movie. But what I think is fair to say to wrap, as we kind of have this discussion, a friend of mine called me about 10 days or 2 weeks into this, and she's kind of a life coach, spiritual coach. I've never hired her, but we're friends. She lives in Salt Lake City. She called me. I was staying in the Hilton across the street from the Salt House. I used to do big events at the Salt House for thousands of people. When you walk over there, it was meaningful, it was impactful. These were people that they were kind of your people, as it were. And I remember that night, I just had a really hard night. The pressure of the lawsuit was stressful. The whole thing was stressful. You lost your community. It was almost like surreal to be there and no one even knows or cares, and your whole life's been flipped upside down. And she normally is the kind of person where our relationship is, she would text me, hey, can you talk this week? We're not super good friends. She picks up the phone. I see her name, pick it up, and I go, hello, what's up? What's going on? She goes, hey, you've been on my heart. She goes, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing great. What I should have said is like, I'm not doing so great. I feel terrible. I just burst into tears. She goes, I got a word for you. And I go, what's that? She goes, trust the redirect. She goes, trust that God's in the details of your life, and trust that you're being redirected for good right now. This is 10 days in to the termination. And on one hand, like the hair stands up on your arms, feel it in your soul. And on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, I don't really want, can we just put Humpty Dumpty back together again? I don't want to redirect this anymore. I want back to my old life, And I look back now, sometimes the worst day of your life and the best day of your life are the same day. And, you have the right people that come together with the right heart, people that have been revealed to you in tough times. You have the right idea and the right mission and purpose, in our case, to go make a difference in the world and to build a team of people that wanted to make a difference and to go do something that makes a difference. But on our next one, what I want to talk about, and we'll do this one soon so that we don't leave you guys hanging on a cliffhanger here, is just how we put this team together. How Bob Finnegan wakes up at 3 a.m. and says, it's called Make Wellness, and just all of a sudden this team starts to come together. And that business story is truly one for the ages. We've been through 4 different offices in, a few months, and you're hoping it's going to pan out. And first 4 days, we hope to sell $400,000 worth of product. You sell $6.4 million. And then you just, how are you going to keep up with the growth? And it's truly become a remarkable business story. So trust the redirect, sometimes your life is happening exactly the way it's supposed to all happen. And that's a little bit of the prelude to the movie that we'll do next time. So love you guys. And if you got some value from this, make sure you share this, and we will see you on our next episode of Justin Prince Show.